Hey everybody, this is the recap for the week in Washington. First of all, the week was full of more depositions down in the SCIF with the impeachment committees. The most two that you're probably hearing about or reading about are Lieutenant Colonel Vindman and his boss Tim Morrison from the National Security Council. I would just tell you this. If you think you know the story, there's a good chance that you do not by a long shot. First of all, both opening statements were leaked to the press. I think one by one's attorney and the other by maybe somebody on either staff or members in the committees. But I will characterize it this way. The testimony did not match up, and that's really, really important. There are significant differences in the story. And so if you think that you can walk over to one of your friends or colleague or somebody and say, see, I told you so, and show them some article, chances are very great that it is a very one-sided article and you don't know half of the fact. Both of these depositions went on for numerous hours, and the opening statement is a very small portion of it, which both sides then went to work on verifying or debunking. And so I would just, if you have an opinion on this, just understand it's a very ill-informed and uninformed opinion, and what is being leaked mostly to the press is information that is just very much one-sided for the most part, and so you just have to know that. So that's kind of what happened. I'd love to tell you much more than that, but I am duty bound not to talk about specifically what the testimony was in those hours-long depositions. But I would just tell you it's very concerning to me about the national security of our country and the transferring of information in that regard and who's supposed to have it, what means are transferred, those type of things. And just to talk about this a little further as I keep thinking about it for all these people that are coming in for these depositions, most of them, probably about 95% of them, are having to do with the Foreign Service, and I'm on Foreign Affairs. And it seems a lot like it's a squabble or a turf war between the administration. When I say the administration, like the State Department, National Security Council, so on and so forth, and the president. And I think as Americans, we have to decide who's in charge and who makes foreign policy. Who makes policy? Is it the president or is it these unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats? And I think once you maybe look at it in those terms, even though you might disagree with the policy, we have to be really clear-eyed on who's in charge and who is doing the work of the person that's in charge, the duly elected president. I disagreed with many of President Obama's foreign policy decisions and domestic policy decisions, but he's the president, and he's elected by the people, and that's within his purview. It's not up to bureaucrats to just undermine that because they disagree with it, and I think that's a dangerous precedent. Just think about that, if you would. The other big thing, the biggest thing, of course, that happened this week was the House voted to formalize the impeachment process. And so let me just talk about that a little bit. We're in this about 5 or 6 weeks now, and I think the pressure was mounting because it is being done in secret. Most people, 3/4 of Congress has no idea what's happening in the SCIF. They can't read the transcripts. They're not present for the deposition, so all they're doing is reading the same press accounts that you are, and yet they were put in a position to vote yes or no on these impeachment provisions. And I think it's because of the pressure that was put to bear on Representative Schiff for doing this all in secret, so to speak. That having been said, this formalizes the process, and what you're being told is that it's going to open it up. There's going to be open hearings. President's counsel, the accused, is going to be president, and we, the minority, will be able to call witnesses. So let me just clarify a couple things for you. Next week, we will continue with the depositions in the SCIF. So when I say it's opened up, it's not really completely opened up. Think of this right now in 3 phases. Phase 1 is what we're in now. Everything's being done in secret. Phase 2, they're going to transfer hearings in the open to the Intelligence Committee. So now where 3/4 of Congress is left out of it, only 20, I think it's about 22 members on that committee will be actually able to ask questions of the witness. Now, as I understand it, it's supposed to be publicly aired. It's supposed to be able to see it. So that's a good thing. So that'll be transparent. But what won't happen then is we still won't be able to call the minority, won't be able to call any witnesses. We won't be able to subpoena anybody, and there'll be no counsel present. So that's phase 2. Then phase 3 will probably be when they're ready to introduce articles of impeachment. They're going to issue a report and that says these are the reasons why. And at that point, then the president's counsel will be present. Then allegedly we'll be able to call witnesses. And I say allegedly because in the rules that we just voted on this week, all of that is at the discretion of the chairman of the committee, who is Representative Schiff. So if we say we want to bring in some witness and he says no, we can't bring the witness in. If we say we want this counsel in and he says no, we can't bring the counsel in. And in fact, during this last week, we had, just think about this, he's the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. We're in the intelligence skiff, and we had questions regarding these witnesses about the intelligence community's involvement in these charges, and we were not allowed to ask those questions. Well, we could ask the questions. The witnesses, we were told not to ask the questions. Witnesses were told not to answer the questions. So even though the bill that we just voted on, I voted no, it passed anyhow, says that we'll be able to do this. It's all under the discretion of the chairman, and so far he has not allowed us to participate in that way.
So wait a second. You just voted on rules for the impeachment process.
Correct.
But the rules are not, there's no balance there. He just basically can say, well, you can ask for this, but I'm probably going to say no.
It says in the rules that the minority can call witnesses, that minority can have counsel present, that minority can subpoena people at the discretion of the chair. So he decides, even though he says we can, if he says no, well, then we can't.
So what also happens, we just voted on the process, but what happens to the work for the past 5 weeks? Like, why didn't we do this in the beginning? Why wasn't that the process voted on before the process started?
That's what we were complaining about. In other words, this is 5 or 6 weeks late in revising this and having a vote on the process so the American people can see. So that's the complaint. And even though now there's at least a vote that formalizes the rules aren't really any better.
Well, and regardless of who the president is, because I really don't think it matters, but how is that, when does the president or the president's, when do they get a say on witnesses and counsel and everything else? When does he get to defend?
Yeah, according to the bill that was just passed that I voted against, it'll be in phase 3 when the articles of impeachment are coming up for a vote, and or in the Senate, because the Senate will start the whole process over again. So that's.
Well, how long is all this supposed to go on? Are we just going to run out the clock? We're just going to keep extending it as long as possible and keep doing nothing for the country?
I don't know how long. It takes as long as it takes, right? And some people will say if witnesses don't come in, it could take a whole lot longer. And
I got that, but we're not doing anything else for the
country. Well, we're not. And so, but anyhow, that's impeachment. That's what happened this week. So it formalized the process. Again, in my opinion, 5 or 6 weeks late, but it formalized the process. That is the process. Let's talk about some things we're not doing. This week, of course, an important event happened last weekend. The Special Forces took out al-Baghdadi, the caliph of the ISIS caliphate, and also his second in command. So congratulations and kudos to American Special Forces. And even at that, the press kind of downplayed it, and I won't, just their characterization. This guy's a brutal killer, a serial rapist. This is the worst of the worst, and the whole world is better, and certainly our country's better that he's not on the planet. But we're not dealing with foreign policy issues, certainly in the Foreign Affairs Committee, because we're dealing with impeachment, but not in Congress either. And to that point, also this week, North Korea, again on Thursday, launched missiles. We're not dealing with any of that. As a matter of fact, the other thing that's happening, if you remember, we're on a continuing resolution right now regarding federal funding, which expires right before Thanksgiving. So it's less than a month. And we're dealing with none of that right now.
Can you explain the continuing resolution again, the CR, because it's being thrown around. That acronym is always around, and I think people are confused.
So the fiscal year runs until the end of September, and then you have to vote to fund government beyond for the new fiscal year. And we were running up until September, and this is where we have a budget number and then all the appropriations bills. The appropriations bills determine how much of that top line budget number gets spent on the military, on the Interior Department, on the Justice Department, you name it, right? On housing and urban development, on transportation. Those are the appropriations bills. Well, the House and the Senate hadn't gotten together on the appropriations bills, so we needed to continue to fund the government past September 30th. So we did what's passing a continuing resolution, a CR, which allows us to keep on going at the same rate that we were in the past. And so that's until November, right before Thanksgiving. Right now, we're supposed to be working on it so that we don't have a shutdown again. And that's what happens if you don't have funding for the government. The government shuts down, so to speak. And so we're not working on that right now. That's my complaint. That's my concern. And so we're going to go right before Thanksgiving and have another crisis. And they're going to say, well, we need to do another continuing resolution because we're not prepared yet. We're not prepared because we're not dealing with it, because we're dealing with other things, namely impeachment. All right, that's the recap for the week. Next week looks like more hearings. It's a district work period, so each member of Congress should be in their districts, but the impeachment depositions will continue. So I could be in the district, but I might be in Washington, D.C., sitting down at the skiff listening to depositions. You kind of got to play it day by day because we really don't know exactly what's going to happen until it's happening like a day or hours before. So anyhow, I hope you have a great week, and that's the recap for this week. Thank you.